The concept of random chance has always remained as a core part of the gaming experience. From the times of old, where people actually sat down and played a board game where fate was at the mercy of random chance in the form of spinning a wheel or rolling dice, to the current age where some of the most addictingly fun games of all time are ones centered around being randomly generated every single time you play them. What I'm trying to say is that random chance is basically everywhere, and that's not entirely a bad thing, at least within some cases. When it's used within single-player games, it can certainly add to the playing experience. Whether it's making your singular playthrough unique by having every single wild Pokemon have randomized stats, or perhaps something more grandiose like a randomized world for which you build what you please. Random chance can actually be a very useful tool if it's used to keep a game from becoming stale, something that single-player games are kinda perfect for. But as for multiplayer games, my thoughts become a lot more complicated. You see, most multiplayer games that center around player versus player combat have a good amount of effort put towards balance. Even if it's clearly not perfect, you'd want to make sure matches can be as even as possible because, as the saying goes, may the best man win. And introducing random mechanics kinda messes with that. Sure, there can be relatively fun cases like items within Smash as a whole, which most certainly throws off balance, but is done in such a way where you feel good when you take advantage of it, but feel horrible when it's used against you. Kinda like random crits in TF2. But then there are random mechanics that simply just exist to try to balance out players of different skill levels entirely, kinda like tripping within Brawl. And if random crits are the items of TF2, then random bullet spread is the tripping of TF2. Now, I understand that's a pretty bold thing to say, especially when a majority of you most likely don't even know what exactly I'm referring to. And honestly, I can't blame ya, as random bullet spread is one of the most hidden mechanics within TF2, and because of that, nobody really bats an eye to just how much it affects the game. From introducing unnecessary damage variation, to making shotguns a crapshoot from any further than point-blank range, I genuinely believe that random bullet spread is one of the worst mechanics still within TF2, and deserves to be removed. But first, I want to quickly clarify something. Yes, I did make a video on random bullet spread back in 2021, but for quite a few reasons, that video just does not hold up well to me. And with random bullet spread becoming a bit of a heated subject in the time since, I feel like now would be a good time to revisit this mechanic to finally put it to rest. So without further ado, let's talk about random bullet spread. But what even is bullet spread? Well, for every single shotgun and scattergun within the game, each individual shot consists of several pellets that deal small amounts of damage each, but together manage to be quite a powerful and fast source of damage. You just gotta get those pellets to connect. So, how should these pellets connect? There's actually a lot of options you could choose. You could make them discount sniper rifles, give every weapon a unique pattern, or simply just make them all inaccurate as hell. But you gotta remember that the goal in mind is still balance. So what would be the most balanced solution? Well, I can't personally say, but as of the time of making this video, Valve has two solutions to the bullet spread problem. Random bullet spread within casual mode as well as man versus machine, and fixed bullet spread within competitive mode. First, let's see what fixed bullet spread has to offer. The way that fixed bullet spread works is that it takes the pellets you shoot and distributes them into an unchanging pattern, which for the stock shotgun, scattergun, as well as a majority of unlocks is a 10 pellet pattern, which consists of 9 pellets placed into a 3x3 grid with an extra 10th pellet in the middle. However, it is important to note that there are other weapons that have their own unique pellet counts and in turn unique spread patterns, which I won't lie, kinda scares me. So for the sake of simplicity, I'm going to focus on the 10 pellet pattern from here on out. As you would likely expect, as you get further away from your target, these pellets will spread further away. But with fixed bullet spread, these pellets will always keep to their shape. And a neat little quirk about this is that regardless of distance, even if you're basically across the map, you will always have 2 perfectly accurate pellets in the middle. But more importantly, no matter how many times you shoot the exact same shot, whether it be 5 times or 1500 times, the damage you deal will always be the same. Make sure to keep that in the back of your mind as we move on to random bullet spread. This type of bullet spread takes the pellets that were already laid out and just kinda shakes them around into a random pattern every single time you fire your gun, with the only limitation to this being a cone in which these pellets must remain inside of, but that's just the beginning. These pellets will still of course become less accurate at longer distances, but the distribution of pellets is, well, random. This has a lot of effects on how these guns work. First being that you lose out on one of the perfectly accurate pellets, but more importantly is that the remaining pellets may just lean towards one side or the other, which is completely out of your control. You see, random bullet spread takes consistency and fucking burns it, as no matter how many times you fire your gun, you can never truly guarantee the amount of damage you will actually deal. You may just happen to deal more or less damage than would fix bullet spread, and unfortunately there is nothing you can do to avoid that. But would you know anything about this? Honestly, probably not. Even if you're aware that random bullet spread exists, its actual effects are a lot more hidden. Hell, I didn't even think about what it actually did for my first few years of playing TF2, and I imagine most of you are probably in the same boat, because frankly, you're not going to think about what random bullet spread does unless you're actively looking for it. And it doesn't help that the only real way to see random bullet spread is to point your gun at a wall and shoot. Congratulations. I mean, there is the alternative of shooting a standing still target, but those only reside in training mode or offline matches, which nobody actually touches, and it's not like actual players are gonna give you a free kill unless they are that new, or are just an unaware sniper main. But even after all that, that's assuming you're paying close attention to the damage numbers of each shot. Compare that to the infamous random crits, which not only make a loud and unique sound, but also clearly do triple the damage, which can very easily be a death sentence. Plus, projectiles have an additional team-colored glow just to signify how screwed you are. What I'm trying to say is that random bullet spread is virtually invisible and almost always goes unnoticed within regular matches at TF2, making its existence only known via word of mouth or really specific situations that players are just not gonna think about. And when you can barely distinguish the differences between something being on and off, its effects in any given situation become practically indeterminate. Is it on or off in this footage? Who knows? But because of how hard it really is to figure out whether or not random bullet spread had an effect on any given situation, it's led people to simply just ignore that it exists entirely, or even shift the blame onto your aim. So, let's talk about aim. Aiming is the most important part of every single shooter ever made. If you can consistently point your gun at your target and shoot, you deserve to deal decent damage for the range you're in. And if you cannot aim, you deserve to be punished by dealing little to no damage at all. And a very important part of improving your aim is consistency. I get it, sometimes TF2 will make your shots look a bit iffy, but even then, you should be able to get a rough idea of how much damage you're gonna deal at any given time, as long as you can reliably hit that shot. Once we introduce random mechanics into the picture, the line between what classifies as a meaty hit and a painful miss begins to blur even more than it already was. Is this additional blur something we actually want in the game? I can't exactly imagine so. Think about how people would feel if all rockets just curved off in a random direction over some distance. It sure as hell wouldn't be fun, even if the curve was incredibly minimal. When it comes to fairness, consistency is key, which random bullet spread is the antithesis of. Having the ability to perform differently no matter how good your aim is just simply doesn't belong in the game. Think about how a brand new player might feel while trying to learn classes like Scout or Engineer. Yeah, their aim is very likely to be atrocious anyway, but with random bullet spread active, they may do a lot better in some cases, landing more pellets than usual, or a lot worse, landing less pellets than usual. This could very easily give the illusion of improvement or the lack thereof, something that may influence a player's thoughts on these classes going forward, which is honestly a shame if they don't know that there's something influencing their aim that is completely out of their control. But listen, I'm certainly not saying you cannot improve your aim while dealing with random bullet spread, as you most certainly can, but without it, you get a much clearer idea of how well you're performing, which if you're actually wanting to improve is quite a good way to gauge your progress. But regardless of all the points I've made against random bullet spread, many others have voiced their thoughts on the mechanic, with some sharing their reasons as to why it should actually remain in the game, and it would only seem fair to at least look at these arguments and see if there's any reason to keep it in the game. Starting off with the argument I hear the most, random bullet spread is realistic to how shotguns work in real life, therefore it should just remain in the game. While I certainly cannot deny that shotguns in real life are inherently random and where pellets end up landing, we're not talking about real life, we're talking about a goddamn video game, and not even a realistic one at that. TF2 as a game has been defined by some of its most unrealistic mechanics. Maybe I just don't get out of the house enough, but I can't exactly say I've seen functional teleporters, invincibility, invisibility, nor jumping from high high-powered explosives in my everyday life. With that said, it just wouldn't make a lot of sense to suggest that something like bullet spread of all things to be based on realism when TF2 is just not a realistic game. But in all fairness, that's not really even an argument, is it? The most common argument that I've seen that has at least some weight is random bullet spread barely affects your aim, if at all. As I explained earlier, trying to see whether or not random bullet spread had an effect on an outcome is, to say the least, incredibly difficult, because in a game like TF2, there's a lot of factors that go into any given situation. Not only are you needing to focus on aligning your crosshair with your opponent, you need to factor where your crosshair is, since let's face it, we're not robots, we're human. But you've also got to think about your opponent's hitbox, your ping, their ping, and just dealing with TF2 being TF2. In some scenarios, sure, I can see random bullet spread not affecting anything, but in others, it may very easily be the deciding factor in a matchup. And personally, that's a horrible way to balance gameplay, simply because it shifts battles away from who can aim better to whose pellets just happen to go to the right spot. It doesn't matter whether that chance is 1% or 35%, having any sort of potential to deal varying amounts of damage outside of your control just doesn't belong in this game. I utterly despise the idea of rolling a die when I want to use my gun, but I thought shotguns were only supposed to be good at close range, and random bullet spread is only noticeable at far ranges. The argument that a weapon should only be good at close range is flawed. Basically everything in the game is bound to deal more damage up close because of mechanics like damage ramp up, and while the opposite is also true, just because a weapon is subject to fall off doesn't mean it should be ruled out entirely. Every point of damage counts, you know, and shotguns aren't an exception. You can always try to maximize your damage by going for a meat shot, but you're not always going to be able to go for meat shots. Even scouts have to shoot with a bit of distance from time to time, and if you want those distance shots to count for anything reliably, you need that consistency that can only be achieved with fixed spread. Having pellets remain in consistent patterns makes you much more likely to land something at a distance, as there is nothing that can influence a pellet to move off in a random direction, and the aforementioned 10 pellet pattern is ideal for such a thing, as you have a pellet to the sides and corners of your crosshair, which should allow you to be able to deal some chip damage, as opposed to nothing at all in some cases. But you know, that's a lot of words, so wouldn't removing random bullet spread make the game too competitive? I genuinely cannot see the culture of TF2 shifting at all with the removal of random bullet spread, given that half the player base doesn't even know about it, as well as its only function being to introduce damage variation to a handful of weapons. Removing it would honestly just be a quality of life improvement for the game. It's not like I'm asking for some actually massive changes like introducing class limits to casual mode. I just believe that when it comes down to actions that are reliant on a user's skill, there shouldn't be any additional roadblocks to performing with it, and I don't believe that will water down the game or cater towards competitive players either. For fuck's sake, I, a casual player, am saying this. But even then, TF2 will always be both a casual and competitive game, but at its core, it is a team-focused first-person shooter, one where most classes have basically endless skill ceilings. So I ask, why do we feel the need to keep random chances part of it? Because personally, I could go without it. But wouldn't the panic attack need a rework if random bullet spread is removed? The panic attack is a very unique weapon, in that its current gimmick is that it always uses fixed spread no matter what, at the cost of becoming less accurate with each successful shot. Does that need to be changed? I don't think so. Sure, the removal of random bullet spread would in a way buff shotguns by making them consistent, but I still think the panic attack is unique enough that it really doesn't matter. And finally, how about pistols? They need random bullet spread so they won't be overpowered. Weapons like the pistol, revolver, and SMG are in their own category of weapons and do not operate under the same rules as shotguns, therefore are unaffected by the fixed weapon spread command. The system that these weapons use instead simply makes them a bit less accurate after the first shot within a clip, taking a little over a second to return to perfect accuracy. And personally, I'm a bit mixed on this type of spread. On one hand, it still introduces randomness to skillful weapons, but on the other, pistols deal damage fast, mainly due to their damage being centered around one pellet instead of 10 or 15. If this was perfectly accurate, its DPS would be pretty annoying from across the map, but then again, that would only really affect things that are standing still from afar, which should only be snipers or a defensive sentry. But honestly, I could go without this as well, but am at least a bit more understanding of why someone would want it to remain in the game. Well, it appears that was the final major argument for keeping random bullet spread in the game. So to sum up my thoughts, I believe random bullet spread just doesn't belong within TF2. All it does for the game is make dealing damage with shotguns and scatterguns a bit of a crapshoot. And while it's certainly not as egregious as random crits, I fail to see any sort of value in keeping it in the game. At least random crits can be haha funny at times. This is just land a couple more pellets or a couple less. Laugh. It's simply one of those mechanics that just cannot work within the modern state of TF2, and I genuinely believe that the game would improve with its removal. Even if the difference is subtle, incentivizing consistency over all else is the way to go in a game like TF2. But who cares, right? I'm just bad, right? Listen, I can't make you change your view on random bullet spread, and frankly, it's not worth trying to. I just hope this video was at the very least able to make you look at the facts about this mechanic. Whether or not you agree with my stance is completely up to you, but at the very least, I am very curious to hear your thoughts on random bullet spread, so please write a comment about it. But with that said, thank you for watching, and I await the dumpster fire this video makes. Valve, please remove random bullet spread. It does not belong in the game any longer. Thank you for watching to the very end, and goodbye.